Republicans are making it absolutely clear they want to unseat me. I refuse to let them attack our values. Can I count on you to rush in $10 before midnight to help me fight back? Thank you.
So what you just heard there was Nancy Pelosi soliciting donations for her re-election campaign. But if you listen closely to what she was saying, you'll note that Nancy Pelosi wasn't being entirely honest or forthright with her constituents and with her voters, because the thing you need to understand is that Shahid Buttar, the opponent to Nancy Pelosi, is not a Republican. Shahid Buttar is a fellow Democrat, and he's challenging Nancy Pelosi from the left. Shahid Buttar is a progressive running to challenge Nancy Pelosi. Because what you need to understand about California's primary system is that they run something known as a jungled primary, which means that earlier in the year they had a primary race in which basically anyone could run. Multiple Democrats, multiple Republicans could run, and basically they are now going into a runoff. So you can see right here, this is the election results for last time around for the sort of jungled primary in California's 12th House District with Nancy Pelosi. You can see here Nancy Pelosi getting 74% of the vote, with Shahid Buttar, a fellow Democrat right here, getting 13% of the vote. Both of them there being sufficient to make a runoff. So they are facing head to head. And you can see here the highest ranked Republican, John Dennis here, only getting 7% of the vote because Nancy Pelosi's district is obviously extremely blue. And so for Nancy Pelosi to come out and characterize Shahid Buttar, a progressive and a fellow Democrat running against her, as just a Republican is, in my opinion, really dishonest and just not forthright with the voters. One of the things that I talk about on this channel, one of the things that, sort of very, very central to my political views, one of the things that I talk about a lot on this channel is how it's very, very important in a democratic society to say what you actually believe, one, and to two, characterize the opponents, characterize the arguments of your opponents in a fair way. Now, that may be naive, that may be, oh, that's utopian, that's impossible, but I do really believe that if we want a good faith and a healthy democracy, it's super, super important that we do the best that we can to hold our leaders accountable in that way, right? Like if we want to have an effective democracy, that's something that we have to see. If people just mischaracterize other people's arguments, then democracy can't work, right? That's one of the central things that's super, super important to democracy. And it's something that I've always talked about on this channel that I'm very, very passionate about. Like we cannot have a democracy if people mischaracterize other people's arguments. As naive as that might sound, it really is very important. So in what I see from Nancy Pelosi here is Nancy Pelosi intentionally undermining democracy in order to lie and smear about Shahid Buttar. It is incredibly important for voters to be able to make up their own mind. Now, if Nancy Pelosi put out that video, now look, you guys know I'm progressive. You guys know that I don't necessarily like I'm to the left of Nancy Pelosi. If I was in California's 12th district, I would be voting for Shahid Buttar. But what you need to understand is if Nancy Pelosi put out that video and then fairly characterized it to her voters and said, look, you guys know me. I've been in this district for a long time. Shahid's a progressive. He's running to the left of me. You guys make up your own mind. Then that's okay. Like, I wouldn't be making this video, right? Like, let the voters make up their own minds. I can tell you what I would be doing if I was in California's 12th district. But if the voters make up their own mind, the voters make up their own mind. But what Nancy Pelosi cannot do, what Nancy Pelosi should not do if she respects democracy in any way, is she cannot mischaracterize to the voters the nature of her opponent's arguments, the nature of Shahid's arguments. So let's look at Shahid Buttar's issues page. So if you go on Shahid's issues page right here, let me make it bigger for you. You can see here when it comes to climate policy, Shahid Buttar supports a Green New Deal. He supports, all kinds of important issues. I mean, you can go through and read all this stuff yourself. But when it comes to healthcare, he supports Medicare for all as proposed by Representative Pramila Jayapal. When it comes to housing, he supports a number of serious housing reforms, including, you can see here. I mean, he just has like a lot of information on housing here. He supports affordable housing through VA. In other words, basically, Shahid Buttar is not a Republican. He's not like, it's not like, oh, he's running to the left of Nancy Pelosi on some issues, but then, to the right of Nancy Pelosi on other issues. No, Shahid Buttar is a very consistent progressive. He's a very consistent, sort of lefty. And, you know, I am just genuinely offended at Nancy Pelosi lying like that. It's really dishonest. I mean, Nancy Pelosi loves to talk about how she's protecting democracy from the Russians and things like that. But I don't see her protecting democracy, doing the very minimal, the bare minimum to protect democracy in her own race, in her own House seat. Because when it comes to protecting democracy, it's not just about systemic issues. It's not just about stopping Russia. It's also about being honest and characterizing the arguments of your opponents in a genuine and fair manner. And that's not what Nancy Pelosi is doing here. So anyway, just my 2 cents on that clip there. So if you like the video, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.